Hi everyone, I'm Maloni Bhatt and welcome to this special conversation and live Q&A on studying and living in the United States of America. The count of Indian students studying in the United States surged by 35%, reaching a record of almost 269,000 in the academic year 2022 and 2023. This is according to Open Doors report, which is an annual survey of international students in the US. Indian students now make up over 25% of the 1 million plus international students in the US, surpassing China as the leading source of graduate students for the first time since 2009 and 2010. Now, many among you may want to study in the United States, but don't know how to get started. Today, we have three experts who will help you do just that, provide you with all the information that you need on your applications, admissions, scholarships, almost anything that you need to know about going to study in the US. So, joining us today, I'm very happy to welcome our guests, Dr. Rajika Bhandari. She's a principal at Rajika Bhandari Advisors, a distinguished international higher education expert. With 2 decades of experience, she has authored the award-winning book, America Calling, and co-founded the South Asia International Education Network, fostering connections between US and South Asian universities. Rajika, welcome.
Thank you so much, Maloni. I'm delighted to join you today, and greetings to all the students who are joining us.
Thank you very much, Rajika. We are looking forward to hearing from you. Next, we have with us Yudi, a senior product manager in a fintech startup and a former computer science master's student from California State University. His side hustle is to create content for international students to help them figure out their study abroad journey and how to get a job in the United States. He has over 423,000 total followers on all of his social media platforms with over 93 plus million views. Welcome, Yudi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And we're excited to have you. And finally, we have with us Anand Cavale. He's an expert fintech and banking executive. He's the chief growth officer at MPower Financing, specializing in payments and lending businesses. He's known for executing transformations and driving profitability. He's a strategic growth catalyst in the digital finance space. Welcome, Anand.
Thank you. Nice to be here. And hello, everyone.
It's wonderful for us to have you all here, and thank you very much to everyone who's joined us. Now, just a quick note for all of you, either educators, students, parents who are joining us, please type in your queries and questions in the chat. Please note that these will be taken up after this short discussion with the three guests. So first, let's just dive in and, I wanted to speak to you, Rajika and Yudi, about studying and living in the US. What are the crucial factors for students when choosing universities? And how would you say these factors impact a student's experience and future opportunities? If you could take that up first, Rajika.
Yeah, sure. I can start with that. And as a prospective student, there's so many things to think about, right? There's location, there's of course the degree and the program of study, the cost, and where you're going to go. And I'm going to start with a bit of a counterpoint, or a counter view, which is that so often in this process of applications and admissions and studying abroad, we tend to get so fixated with the idea of rankings and prestige and big brand name institutions and Ivy Leagues. But, we're talking about just a handful of institutions, and the US higher education sector is the largest in the world with over 4,000 institutions. So that's a starting point that I want to make, that there is huge diversity in the US higher education sector, and you really need to think about fit and what's the program that you're interested in studying. And especially if you're going to be at the graduate level, thinking about the program and how good an institution is reputed for that is almost more important. The other piece I want to mention is, again, sort of thinking about, big brand name institutions versus what might be considered smaller institutions, is that very often institutions that you might not have thought of initially are actually focusing a lot on their international students and really working hard to attract them, and therefore actually providing a much better high-touch experience for international students. So that's something to think about. Also, how international are they already? Meloni started by mentioning the Open Doors report. That's a great place to go to look at what's the proportion of the international student body on many campuses. So I think really thinking about the fit and is it right for you, because there really is a range of options. And Meloni, to your second question on what impact does it have, again, what I'm going to emphasize is that the impact is not so much the brand of the institution, but how well has the institution done to prepare you for your outcomes when you finish your education. So in fact, today we have rankings of institutions based on employability, that how good a job has an institution done in terms of actually making its graduates employable. So I think that with any institution in the US, you can't go wrong with a Made in America degree, and to really focus on some of these aspects.
Thank you very much, Rajika. That's a comprehensive response, and I think a good one, where Yudi can come in now. Yudi, you went to California State University. Talk to us about your own experience. How was it like? Why did you select that particular university? And, what was your experience and the opportunities that you then went on to have?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, I did my master's in computer science from Chico State, and it's not like a branded university, but like the reason I chose that was the cost. There's like four main factors: cost, coursework, location, and then university brand experience. I did have an admit from USC, which is obviously like a top brand, and like what Rajika was mentioning about the branded university. But for me, the priority was cost. I knew my budget. I knew like this is what I can afford. So that's like, so people who are looking or thinking about like universities, you also need to look at what can you afford, and don't just go because the brand is there. So for me, cost was the most important aspect of it. I knew the coursework was really good, and that's what I wanted to do. So that kind of fit my thing. I was like, okay, this fits in my budget. I can do entire masters in $30,000, including my cost of living. And yes, it is possible. And there are a lot of on-campus opportunities, less international student, which gives me more opportunity to as an exposure. So those were like my main reason for selecting. Talking about my experience, it was one of the best experience. I feel like if people can afford, I would highly encourage they should experience the study abroad, because yes, you will learn the technical skills, and yes, you will get the job and all of that, but you will grow a lot as a person. And so the personal growth journey that I had, like if you were to talk to me 10 years ago when I came, I would be completely different person. I was shy, introvert, like no public speaking skills, etc. But when you jump into United States, you just grow. You are like thrown into so many out of your comfort zone areas. You meet new people. So I just feel like my journey, my growth was amazing as a person. And yeah, so I think those were some of my experiences. And then I love one of the aspect of United States is that you get to meet a lot of new people, whether it's on your campus or like on your campus jobs and things like that. And you build those relationships for life, and they just stay with you. So yeah, those are like some of
we can hear that excitement in your voice, and I think a lot of us will tell you that the friends that you make, the connects that you make at the time of your college, and when you're learning, I think those are the connects that stay for life, and it's wonderful, that you've had such a fantastic experience. But Anand, you need to come in. Everything that there was a part that Rajika focused on was budget, and she said, don't get hung up on those Ivy Leagues. And again, a mention that Yudi made to it. So, talk to us about how should anyone who wants to study in the US, go about deciding in terms of budgeting, what will be a good fit for them?
Yeah, I think, what Rajika and Yudi mentioned are very important, right? You get a very wholesome education no matter where you go in the United States, okay? One other thing that Yudi mentioned clearly was a personal experience for me as well. You get much more well-rounded experience in a US education. I came from engineering and I did my MBA in the US. And it really kind of rounds you out in terms of what can be done. But when you decide what you want to do, one is very important that you figure out where you want to grow, what you want to be, and hence the course that you want to pick. And then within that, as you pick what's your budget, what can you afford, right? Sometimes you're able to afford partially to pay, because you could be an undergraduate and you'd be working for a couple of years, you have saved up some money, or you could have family support to be able to afford some of the education, right? For those who don't, the options are a few. One is you could aim for certain scholarship and assistantship at universities that allow you to get free education. They're far and few, but they are available, right? For the right kind of student and the right fit, the universities will give you some sort of an assistantship. It could be partial, it could be full. For those who either don't get an assistantship or don't have their means of supporting or have partial means of supporting, one of the ways of doing it is you could borrow. If you're confident about your ability of what you're going to study, and that is going to enhance your future career in a certain way, and then you're able to get a better path towards your career and earn more. Knowing that you could apply for a loan that allows you to complete your education, whether it's a partial loan or a full loan. We at MPower, for example, will give you a very transparent, easy to apply a digital experience that technically will give you up to $100,000 on a fixed interest basis. That means you will know what amount you're going to pay throughout your education, and it doesn't vary. Now you can get a variable loan expense, or you can get a loan or a fixed rate loan. In our case, we want to make sure that the student knows what they want to pay. They get what they see, and it's very transparent. And more importantly, that you don't get charged with unnecessary FX or other sort of fees, which kind of help to the student in terms of their eventual goal, right? So you could borrow, you could repay. In our case, you only pay interest during your in-school period, and after 6 months after graduation, you pay principal plus interest. The intent here is that you should be able to work on campus while you're studying and be able to pay the interest. And then later on, when you graduate, you are able to get a good enough career growth that can allow you to repay your loan in a reasonable amount of time. So the options, depending on where you are, where you want to go, and budgeting, you can look at all of these 2 or 3 different options.
All right, and this is all good information and good to know, but, time to bring you in, Rajika. Anand, spoke to us about the financing bit for it, but, talk to us about the applications process and the common mistake that students should avoid, Also discuss the social aspect, because there's a whole integration, which a person undergoes when they sort of move to the US. How easy will it be for them to make friends? What is the social life like? And then I think Yudi can take it up from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things I always tell students is that, they're very well prepared, and sort of through webinars like this and other support that they're getting on kind of the details and logistics and factual aspect of studying in the US, which are the best universities, where should I go, how long is the course of study, etc., etc. But where I find that students need to do a lot more work is really preparing themselves for entering a completely different context. And Yudi spoke to this, and I think Yudi, Anand, and I've all been through that journey of landing in the US in a bit of a clueless way, and then finding our way and really growing as individuals. But I do think that there are things that students can be doing right now to better prepare themselves. So one of the things I often talk about is that it's also about really shifting your mindset. And one of the challenges and opportunities you will be confronted with right away when you land in the US, especially again if you are going at the graduate level, is that there is a huge amount of independence expected of you. And the US has too many choices. In fact, it's often been described as almost a paradox of choice, that you will be drowning in the number of choices you have, the decisions you have to make, and how independently you will have to make them in a classroom from the get-go. I still remember the day when I entered my campus and my doctoral advisor said to me, "So what would you like to study?" And I just sat there thinking, aren't you supposed to be the one telling me what I should study? So it's a real mindset shift in owning your learning, in beginning to think much more independently on how you will shape your study, and really sort of developing the mindset that you will need to really advocate for yourself as a student, as an individual. So I think that piece is really important. The second thing that I want to emphasize, and again, these are some of the more we don't tend to think about them, but they're absolutely related to how successful one can be once one is actually abroad. The other is really educate yourself even before you go. And I don't mean, again, thinking about just the mechanics of the application process or watching all American shows, or, everybody is aware of all of that because of media today. But really thinking about, are you developing an understanding of the society that you're about to enter, depending on how many years you will be here. If it's 2 years for just a master's degree, it could be up to 6 or 7 years if you're going for a PhD, and maybe, 4 or 5 for an undergraduate degree. That you are entering a completely different context, and how aware are you truly of what the social fabric of America is like. So really beginning to think about that and educate yourself about that. And I think that's been particularly important in the past 4 or 5 years as things have really changed in the US socially. There's been much more awareness of racial identity, of social justice issues, which international students have also become a part of now in the US and part of those conversations. So I would say that those are two broad things that I want to mention that are tied to student success, but I'll turn to Yudi for sort of maybe more specific thoughts on the applications, because his experience is certainly much more current than when I came to the US.
Take it away.
So, right. I agree with you, Rajika. But like, if you think about, like, I'm gonna go more tactical advice over here from application process, right? So if you want to go, so in United States, there's mainly 2 semesters: fall semester, spring semester. And if you want to study in fall, let's say if you want to come in fall 2024, ideally 1 year before is when you want to start your process, which means you want to start preparing your statement of purpose, letter of recommendations. These are the things you will need for your application process. You will need to figure out which university are you going to go. You will need your GRE, TOEFL, which are the entrance exams. Some universities are now waiving that off as well. So if you want to go fall 2024, ideal timeline would be August is when you start. And then if, again, obviously, if you're right now thinking about going to fall, it's fine. You can still start it. Each university, the beauty is that each university have their own timelines, which is very different than how Indian education system is. So some universities might let you in even in March of 2024 if you want to, because they have their deadlines open until then. So it's really independent to each university. But my advice would be to start early, because a lot of universities who gives out scholarship is like, sometimes it's first come first serve basis, because they want to also lock you in, because they know that students have now choice to apply to 4,000 universities. They don't want to lose you as a student, so they'll try to give you scholarships if you apply early in terms of timeline. And ideal timeline is like November-ish is when you will want to start applying. You will starting receiving the admits in November, December, January, and then you'll obviously keep receiving until like February, March. So talking about that's like the ideal application timeline. And of course, there's like all the do's and don'ts. But one of the big mistake, if I were to go back in time, I made is not having a clarity on what career I want to get into. So for example, right now I'm as a product manager. If someone is watching and they're like, I don't know, my career, I want to do something in tech, something in business, that's good. You have some direction, but ideally you want to narrow it down to a job role. So if it is product manager, project manager, program manager, now you have that. Go on LinkedIn, go to your dream companies, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, whatever that is, and then find out the job description, understand the skills that are required. Now you know what skills you need to build. Now choose the course based on that. So like really have that clarity before you start this journey, because a lot of time people just do it because everyone else is doing it, and then you get lost in the process, not knowing and getting something which you didn't expect to get it. So yeah, sorry, I said like a lot of things. Hopefully that helps.
These are all very good things. This whole thing about reverse engineering, I mean, basically
Yeah.
going to the companies, I think that is a very important point, and I think gets lost because you're right. Everyone wants to go to those universities or colleges that, other people have been to or they've heard about. But I think this is actually a more practical and a more strategic way of doing it. So, all good points. But Rajika, to you now, can you speak to us a little bit about the visa interview process, the common challenges that Indian students might face? And could you also suggest resources for students and parents to navigate this process?
Sure, I'm happy to speak to those two. But first, I just wanted to sort of add to something that Yudi just said. And I think that's fabulous advice on being as concrete as possible. But I would also offer that give yourself flexibility once you arrive in the US, because that is one of the beauties and strengths of the American higher education system, that it functions on the idea of fluidity and flexibility. So you are not locked in. If you are coming to the US to study engineering, you may discover that it's absolutely important for you to take a course in ethics, especially as we become a society that's driven by artificial intelligence. So allow yourself that flexibility. I would say reap that flexibility, because that is one of the most amazing things about American colleges and universities. To your question about, so I'll tackle the where to go for information first. Any student thinking of coming to the US should begin their journey at the Education USA office or the Education USA network, which is a US government program, and that exists in all major cities and many tier 2 cities as well. Most Education USA advisors are located at, if you're in a large metro, then at the Fulbright Commission or the United States India Educational Foundation. And the reason this is so important is that they offer completely unbiased, helpful advice, again, on finding that institution that's the right fit for you, because they work with all American campuses and they're not paid agents or recruiters. So you know that the advice you're getting is really tailored to you and to your needs. So that's a starting point for every family. Go visit your Education USA office, and they're easily accessible and it's free. They have online webinars and just a lot of information. So I think that's a key starting point. I do want to address undergraduates, because there are probably many students on the call who are interested in undergraduate study as well. At your high school, check about who is your school counselor, and are they part of the IC3 network or the International Career and College Counseling Network, which is a rapidly growing network in India, where schools and teachers are really being trained and grown as counselors, and part of that is advising students on studying abroad. So third point, visas. And this is something that's it's very, very stressful for students. So I do want to acknowledge that. The first thing I'll say is, when we think of interview, we're thinking, oh, we're going to have 30 minutes to make our case. No, it's 2 or 3 minutes. That's if that. And that's the one thing I remember from my days, and it hasn't changed, that you're in there and in the blink of an eye, it's over. So you have to be very clear in your answers. You have to be very prepared, which is not to say that you're just going to spit out information, because what you say is going to be driven by what the counselor officer asks you. But couple of things, tips in sort of thinking about this. One is you have to understand that the F1 student visa is a non-immigrant visa, which means that you are being considered for that visa for the temporary purpose to go to the US to study. And that's what your goal should be. That's what your conversation during your interview should be about. So the intent and the reason that visa is given is you're going to the US to study and you're coming back. So really focus on your studies. Really be clear about why you have selected that institution. We talked a lot about this earlier, right? Picking the right institution. So be very clear in being able to talk about that, how you pick that institution and why, and the program of study. So I think being very clear in these things is what makes those 2 or 3 minutes really successful. So
And
I'll stop there.
if I may add, one other thing is be very clear how you're going to fund your education.
Yes.
That's a question that'll come up because you'll have your I-20, which basically indicates what's the cost of your education that comes from the university. So the officer will ask you, this is your annual cost. Do you have the ability and the means to pay for this annual cost? And you need to have a very crisp, clear answer on how you're going to fund it. It could be that you have your own savings of this much. You could be saying that, I have a loan for the remaining amount, or my parents are giving me the money. Whatever it is, you have to be yourself and you have to answer that question.
All right. But, delve a little deeper into it, Anand. Why don't you guide us on creating a budget, including living expenses, once all these students go to the US to study, and provide us some insights into managing finances effectively in different cities.
Yeah, I think what one needs to understand is, by and large, people underestimate their living expenses, okay? Because they have lived in their hometown under the auspices of their parents or something like that. But when you go, overseas, you're completely uprooting yourself and you're going to a new environment, right? Tuition may be covered, but then you have to think about housing, you have to think about communication, phones, you need to think about insurance, and you need to think about commute. If it's not a metro, then you need to have a car. If it's a metro, car is great. Car is not needed. You can travel, but all of these add up at the end of the day, right? And there are means to pay, right? You can work on campus for a certain duration of time that the visa allows you to work on campus, and you can pay for those services. But when you budget for these things, you should have a rough estimate. Like Rajika, I remember when I first landed in the US, it used to cost me $3.50 a minute on AT&T. Okay. And, if we had to call back home, we had to kind of really think about what are you going to say in 3 minutes? And today it's free with WhatsApp. So things change and evolve, right? At the end of the day. So there are things that will cost money. There are things, are you going to share your apartment with somebody else? Are you going to go on campus housing? Are you going to go off campus housing? What's the cost difference between the two? So there's a lot of things that you can do homework while you're here and then figure out how much you need. And I know sometimes, like when we lend for both. If this college gives tuition and also gives living expenses, you can borrow with the living expenses and the tuition amount. That is within about $100,000 when you do it with MPower. So you can plan for those things depending on what you have and what you don't have, what your gaps are.
All right. Yudi, why don't you come in and, talk to us about any revelations that you might have had with living expenses in the United States, and, how did you manage?
Yeah, and one of the things over the time I've learned is people think that they're going to get on-campus jobs, so they don't plan for living expenses, right? So a lot of time there's this stigma or myth that, you don't worry about living expense, just focus on your tuition fees because you can get an on-campus job and you will be able to manage it. But the problem is not everyone will be able to get that on-campus job. And if you don't, now you have to figure out and scramble and how to get it. And then you'll probably get a credit card and all of that. So plan it before thinking that you have to pay this. So budget it. And then if you get an on-campus job, that's great. Like you have now savings or whatever. You don't need to use that money. So that's like, I would say like one of the big thing I have learned over time is like to come with that expectation that you will have to pay on campus for your cost of living. But the ways to, like, I think there are a lot of opportunities on campus. That is another good thing. These universities are giant universities. I mean, most of them, and there are a lot of departments are actually ran by students. So that means that you will have on-campus job opportunities, and then there are some opportunities. I know we talked briefly about scholarship, but there are some opportunities where you get to actually work for a professor, whether it is a teaching assistant, graduate assistant, or a research assistant, where you are helping a professor to do a research. If you get to do that, now you're technically working for a university and you're helping university do their research. So then they are saying like, hey, we will waive off your tuition fees, entire tuition fees, or 50% tuition fees. So those are opportunities available, and that's just one part. There are other campuses who have like real world opportunities available. I had a web consultant, which is like another, like if you are in a consulting world, that's a real job you will get after you graduate. So again, people won't think that those opportunities are available. There are obviously cafeteria jobs and where you can do like a more manual labor job, but there are also like desk jobs available and things like that, which are closely aligned to your career. So I would look for all the departments and not just something which is very specific to you, because every department needs someone to manage a desk, a receptionist, or like their website and things like that. And there might be an opportunity, you just have to reach out and ask. So, yeah.
All right.
But I
You'd be very keen to understand that, how long before you kind of leave for your university do you need to plan all of these things? Or is it, once you arrive? What would you suggest?
Yeah, so for teaching assistantship, research assistantship, you should do it before you arrive. So you can start emailing professors. That is what I've seen, where some of the students they have gotten an admit, they've gotten a visa, they know now that I'm going to this university, and they can reach out to a professor if they are really keen on their research, and they can reach out to them. For on-campus job, everyone will get an access to a portal, which is University Jobs Portal before, but you won't be able to like really apply or interview until you get there. What you want to do is build relationship with the seniors who are already there, because they are the ones who's going to help you do the referral and tell you which jobs are good and not good, and how much you'll make and how they will interview, etc. They have a lot more influence because they are already working in that department. So both are working, it just depends on which one you are trying to go for.
All right, excellent. Yes, Anand.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one thing is, from a gradation perspective, getting a campus job might be easier than a graduate assistantship. It takes quite a lot of effort, right? And it's fewer. Second is there's a limit on the number of hours that actually you can work on campus. So it's not like, you can cover all your expenses with a job on campus. And thirdly, like Yudi mentioned, the day you land, you're not going to get. It's going to take some time for you to acclimatize yourself, and then, figuring out what the process is and do you fit for certain roles. And so there's a process that takes some time. So one needs to take all of that into account and have some savings, or at least means to pay early on. That was my point.
All right. But Anand, as a segue into it, could you talk to us about the factors that students should consider, when they choose their lenders in this case for studying abroad? And, what are the important aspects beyond just interest rates that they need to look at when they select loans?
Yeah, I think there's a few factors that students should think about, right? One is how transparent is the company, how trustworthy is the company. So you can get companies, feedback from consumers through Trustpilot or other sources that's on the website that says, this is a company I really like, and there's ratings just like you see on Amazon. How the product fared, etc. Right? So, is the company trustworthy? Is it transparent? Is the process very clean and easy to apply? Do you get what you see? So there's fixed rate loans, as I mentioned before, which basically means, for example, an MPower, your payments will remain fixed to the duration of the loan. Variable rate means your rates can vary. That means your payments can vary during the payments as you're making them. So if the rates go up, your payments go up. So you need to be able to say which one are you comfortable with, right? Today the rates might be low, it might go higher, or the rates might be high, it might go lower. But if
Right.
you want certainty, you want to look for fixed rate loans. A lot of lending companies charge various number of fees, right? So for example, if you take a loan that's a US dollar denominated, like we do at MPower, and we actually transmit the money directly to the university when the university, takes it for the student, right? So in other words, you are approved, the money goes directly to the bursar of the university on a certain date. There is no FX impact in that case. But if you take a loan that gets deposited in your account in India and you have to convert that to US dollars, there's an FX conversion fee, right?
Right.
Some of the lenders will charge insurance. There's an insurance cost. So all these add up at the end of the day, right? If you get a great job, let's say you're very successful, you get a great job and you want to prepay the loan, right? In our case, there's no prepayment. I mean, you can pay off the entire loan and there's no fee. Some lenders will charge a prepayment fee for paying it off early. So there are a lot of, you want to read your terms, you want to understand, you want to look at how trustworthy the company is, what do others tell about the company, right? And make a decision, which one you're comfortable with.
All right, all important and good points. This is now my last question before we actually slip into the Q&A, and we've got a lot of them. I can see it on chat. But Rajika, this one is for you. Talk to us about the US job market, because at the end of the day, a lot of these students are going there, to get themselves armed with skills, and then of course maybe an opportunity to work in the US. So talk to us a little bit about the US job market outlook, for the next year and beyond.
Yeah, so the outlook is looking quite positive in terms of sort of the transition that students make and sort of what that pathway looks like. I think many students might already be aware that if they're already in the STEM field, they're planning on pursuing a STEM field, then they have up to 3 years of that opportunity to pursue a period of work that's related to their studies, and also offers an opportunity for more applied learning, or what's called optional practical training. So 3 years of OPT for STEM students. The good news is that in the US, I think the shift happened last year, where the US government really expanded what constitutes STEM. So it's actually a much larger number of fields of study that can now, where students in those fields can avail of those 3 years of OPT. Beyond that, of course, there's sort of, if someone wants to stay on, then there's that transition from, the pathway from OPT to H-1B visas and green cards, which is sort of a whole other conversation unto itself. And I'm sure Yudi would also have more to add to that. But just in thinking about the labor market and what's going on and sort of the specifics around it, some of the fields that are really hot right now in the US, and I say hot also because they're really growing, but the country is facing a big talent gap, is around artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and anything related to health and medicine. So again, as you're thinking of your studies and where do your interests sort of fit the gaps that are currently in the US labor market, those are some fields to think about, because it's widely acknowledged now that these are the needs in the country, but there's a bit of a crisis point because they're just not enough domestic American students who are pursuing advanced degrees in those fields. So then who's going to fill that gap? It's going to be the international students and global talent.
All right, so some of it is good news for students, but, as you say, they need to prepare well. But Rajika, before we actually slip into the Q&A, this is something that I think a lot of students want to also know. Talk to us about some of the popular scholarships that Indian students can avail in the US, and, if, whether these scholarships cover 100% of the cost, what is it, what are the modalities like?
Yeah, so I did want to mention a few, and I think this is a good complement to all the points that Yudi and Anand have already made around funding. But one of the things I want to emphasize is that we tend to forget that there are entities, mainly foundations, the philanthropic sector, and even governments, that have some very, very large, generous scholarships. Now, of course, these are few and far between, but I want them to be on your radar. So I will mention just 3 of them. And of course, Sometimes it can depend on the specific demographic, like a lot of opportunities maybe for graduate study, or they may be specifically for for women. But for example, there's the American Association of University Women, or AAUW, that has a very generous international fellowship that covers you between 25 to 50,000 US dollars for your studies at the graduate level. It is only for women students. So for women who are listening to this, that's an opportunity. There's another one called the Margaret McNamara Education Fund, and that is also very generous. And then a third one, which is sort of more at the undergraduate level, if there are people who want to go abroad for undergraduate study, is something called the RISE Scholarship that's launched jointly by the Rhodes Trust and Schmidt Futures. And that is focused on identifying early talent when students as young as about even 16 and 17, and giving them fully funded opportunities to then study abroad. So all of this is to say, don't forget these big flagship fellowships, because they are very generous. There are, of course, the Fulbrights. And again, that depends on where you are in your level of study. But those are, again, sort of a flagship prestigious scholarship to study in the US.
All right, great information. So I hope everyone who's listening in or watching us, please take notes and make sure that you avail of all of these resources that our experts are pointing you toward. But now let's slip into the Q&A, and we've got this first question. Rajika, if you could take it. What are the upcoming in-demand STEM careers for which the US is the place to be, and which are the best universities to pursue them?
Yeah, so, I addressed this a little bit in my last response when I mentioned some of those areas. Again, semiconductors, anything related to AI, data science is another big field. So I mentioned those. I'm not going to go into sort of which specific universities. Again, there are over 4,000 of them. But again, in thinking about how you choose, what I would say is, if you are on a path around research, innovation, more advanced studies, you're definitely looking at an R1 or R2 university, which in sort of is a technical term for a research 1 or research 2 universities, which means that those are the universities that have a very large research enterprise. They're making significant investments in their labs and in their research. It also means they probably have more research assistantships available. So sort of looking at it more through that framework rather than what are sort of some specific names to throw out there.
All right. I think, Rajika, this next one is also for you and maybe for Yudi. In this day and age, is going abroad for your education still beneficial?
Oh, I love this question. And I think Yudi started his remarks with this. It is absolutely beneficial. Look at the three of us on this call. We were very different people, I don't know, many, many years ago. So it is absolutely critical. It transforms you as an individual from a employment and competitiveness perspective. It will prepare you for a global workforce, unlike any other experience. That being said, I also want to acknowledge it is not something that's within everyone's reach. Despite the huge number of Indian students who go abroad, statistically, it is only 1% of the Indian college-aged population. So I do want to acknowledge that. For others, for whom this does not come about, I think there are still many different ways of really being global. And, in many Indian universities have global partnerships now. You can do hybrid programs, sandwich programs. Then there's, of course, online learning as well.
All right. Anand, you want to come in into this question?
First of all, I think you asked before, I would say the US economy is doing fabulously well post-COVID, right? I mean, just look at the unemployment rate, look at we had a little bit of turbulence in terms of inflation, but inflation is coming down. And, everyone forecasted recession. There's no recession. The general consumer is doing very well. The job scene is looking pretty good. It's 1.3 jobs for every, for every person who is looking for a job. So it's still good. It used to be 1.9. So my sense is that the opportunities are very good, right? If somebody is really focused on what they want to do, and they really are put the heart and effort in getting through the school, there's plenty of opportunities. I still think the US is one of the best places to land from a career perspective after you get your skill set. And you can see just not only the three of us, you can see a lot of people who have done very well. Yes, it is very tiny. The gateway is tiny, but you got to make yourself prepared to go through that gate and succeed. But I think once you come out of especially out of a graduate school, I think the opportunities are plentiful in terms of where you want to grow.
All right. Thank you very much, Anand, for this. Rajika, this is a slightly sensitive question, and someone asked, what are the risks to safety of Indian students in the US in the aftermath of many incidents in the recent past? They're talking about gun violence and also racism.
Yeah, and you're right. This is a very difficult issue, but I'm glad we're addressing it because it is important to acknowledge it. Otherwise, it seems like we're sugarcoating everything. And this is indeed a big question in students' minds. And I don't have a good answer, and I'm not going to give false assurances. But what I will say is that so talking first about sort of the gun issue, and that US states vary a great deal in how strict they are about their gun laws. So again, in thinking of how do you make this decision, if this is a factor in your decision making, that is one thing to look at. I think if you are keen on a particular university, it's very fair and important to ask the question on what are their campus protocols, what have incidents around this been like, if any, and what sort of protocols are in place. On the second point about, where South Asian students become targets of hate crime or discrimination, yes, this has been rising against the entire Asian American community in the US. And again, I won't deny it. I think what I would say in this regard is, again, really becoming active on campus, engaging in student groups, finding out which are the student groups, and there are many on campus, that advocate for who you are and what your identity is. And this goes back to some of the things I talked about earlier, understanding the social fabric, because understanding that will help you understand that where do you land and what is the lens through which you are being viewed as an individual, as a member of a certain racial group, and your overall identity. So identify those groups that can serve as a support network and can help you really advocate, again, for your interests. So if there are episodes of discrimination, and really finding that voice. And we've seen that happen on campuses for the first time over the past few years, where international students and many Indian and South Asian students have developed a voice and become active in ways that they have not been in past years, certainly not in my time. So that's what I would have.
It's a very nuanced response, and I think it's a wonderful response. Yudi, would you like to come in, talk about your own experience, if any at all?
Fortunately, I never had any experience like that.
So that's good. I mean, that's music to a lot of people's ears right now. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. But I think there are incidents which I have heard from my subscribers, and I think the key is to know which areas to be and which areas not to be. There are obviously signs like you shouldn't be going in that alleyway in the night by yourself at 9 p.m. Everyone has told you. So like there are obvious signs which you should avoid, and it's not just for like South Asian. It's for everyone. Like it's not just like international students. So yeah, like I think stick to like reach out to your seniors and understand which neighborhoods are good, which are not good, how things work out. So be aware of all those things when you are on the campus.
All right, we're going to now completely flip topics, Yudi, and a couple of questions for you now. So these are in no particular order, but what is the basic salary that one can expect after graduation with a master's in the US in our desired course? Yudi, this one's for you.
Yeah, it's so hard to answer this, but I would say if you are in a tech industry, which means software engineer, data analyst, data scientist, and all of those, like product manager, project manager, it can start anywhere from like 65,000 to like $150,000. And yes, I said $150,000 because and again, this depends on the Bay. Like if you are in the big cities like Bay Area, there you will definitely start $150,000 to $200,000. And if you are in a smaller town like North Carolina or a smaller state, I mean, not smaller state, but like the states which has cheaper cost of living, there you might start with 70 or 65 or 85. So it just depends on the companies, the area you are in, and the experience you have. I just recently did a podcast with a girl. She got into a company and she's making more than $300,000. So again, but it's in Bay Area, so it's like sky's the limit. But anywhere it can start above 65.
All right. Again, this is another question for you. Can you give us a sense of the day-to-day expenses and requirements for living overseas?
Yeah, so if you think about day to day, so first is rent. You will have to pay rent. Then some apartments will come with all the utilities, which includes electricity, internet, garbage, water, and trash. I mean, garbage and trash are the same thing. So those combining will be roughly like, again, this just depends. Like Chico is a very cheaper town. So for me, it was like $250 for rent and all the utilities, because most likely you will be sharing your apartment with, I'm making some assumptions, but you are sharing your apartment with your roommates. So roughly it'll be like anywhere from 100 to 400, depending again on your lifestyle, how much you are like, spending and all of that. And then comes the cost, which is another cost, is going to be the food and entertainment and like what you do outside. Other than you will most likely eat outside because you're going to be so busy on the campus. So like try to batch cook or something. But if you overall, all those are the costs which you will incur, and anywhere it can go from 600 to like 1500. But again, this depends if you're in New York or Boston, where the rent is like $2,000. So it can go, depends on which university, which area you are in. And if you're wanting your own personal bedroom with your own private bedroom, private bathroom, then it can even exceed. So it's just depending on the lifestyle.
All right. Anand, this one's for you. Is it possible for a middle-class student to study in the United States? So I think this is from the cost and finance perspective.
You're muted, Anand.
Yeah, I would say absolutely, right? Most of us came from middle class. We are not rich people when we came in to the US. I think you have to plan appropriately, as I said. If you plan your education and you plan for your either funding, either in terms of assistantship or work and plan your expenses, as Yudi said, it is doable, right? So it's a mix and match between what you do. When you get onto a campus, a regular job, you get an assistantship and you get funding. If nothing else, you have to mix borrowing as well as your ability to earn while you're on campus. But it is doable. And I think as Rajika mentioned, there's a lot of schools, right? You can go across the schools and see which ones are palatable for your interest and within your budget. And as long as you're comfortable within that, you can make it happen.
All right. All right. This is a question from Mohit Ahuja. Is there an ideal age to pursue masters? I'm approaching 35 with 13 years of work in research and consulting industry. I know this is a slightly specific question, Rajika and Anand, but we'd like your thoughts on it, because I'm sure that there are many people who are, considering sort of going back and getting, some sort of skills and degrees after having pursued a few years at work.
I think this is a great question and really important. And I would say that absolutely it is still a good idea. In fact, I'll share from my experience that when I arrived in the US as a graduate student, one of the things that shocked me was how much older all of my peers were, because many of them had actually taken time off between their degrees to explore what they really wanted to do. And therefore, they were so much more driven about their graduate work and why they were there as compared to me. So all of this is to say that if you come out to the US as a more experienced and older student, you will actually find very good company in your classroom itself, because there are many students who are going back to graduate school because they finally honed in on what they want to qualify in. So I think it's still a great idea, and then you have all of the actual practical work experience that you will bring to bear on your studies.
All right, this is another question which Rajika you might want to take, and then everyone else can chime in, Yudi and Anand. Is it possible to study abroad with moderate communication skills in English? Is there a need for entrance exams or other exams to start our courses abroad? So this is directed at Yudi, but Rajika, I think you should take this one.
So I'm going to be the bearer of bad news, which is that if you're already aware that your English needs strengthening, you need to start working on it as soon as possible. This will also be something that will sort of be assessed in your interview, that how comfortable are you in the language. Although whether or not your English is good enough will already have been determined by your university, but the consular officer is also going to be sort of looking at that. So you do need to start strengthening your English. You will be required to take the TOEFL, the test of English as a foreign language. So that will anyway be an assessment of your English. And then when you arrive in the US, it is not uncommon for, and this again depends on the campus and sort of where you sit in your language ability, but you may be required to take some remedial courses in English, but a basic functional level definitely needs to be there.
All right, Yudi?
I agree 100%, but I also want to say my English, I would probably consider poor English when I came to United States. I'm not saying that you should come like that. Like Rajika said, come prepare. If you're aware that your English needs work, then work on it. But it's not that you will not be able to survive. Like
It's
if
not
you were to speak
very much of a limiting factor is what you're saying.
Yeah. Like I could not frame a sentence in the beginning when I landed, but now I'm able to talk, communicate. So you will be able to do it. So you just have to, and you just have to work for it.
All right, two specific questions now. This is addressed to Yudi and Anand. What is the scope of placement in the United States for data science? What scholarships are available for masters and the prerequisites that are required for the same? And during masters, what jobs are we eligible to do? So I think there are a couple of questions. So I think that's something that, is for everyone. I think Yudi, Rajika, and Anand. So Yudi, why don't you start?
Yeah, so placement, there's no such thing called placements in United States. In India, companies come to your university and they are like recruiting. There's a recruiting round and all of that. That doesn't happen in United States. But there are something called career fairs where you do get an opportunity to meet the companies, and some of them are recruiting, some of them are not. So it's a very different approach to how the hiring industry work in United States. So in talking about the job demand, like for data science, yes, I mean, if you see the internet and where the technology is going, everything is on cloud. There's so much, millions and millions of data generating every single day. People need data scientists to make sense of that data, which we've been collecting. So it is only going to be there. And scholarship, I think we've already touched on it, but there are plenty of opportunities available on campus, off campus, like Rajika mentioned. There are need-based, merit-based. But yeah, that's my answer. I'll pass it on to Anand to add to that.
From my perspective, I think there are companies who tend to come and interview on campus, or there are companies that will come and say we're recruiting for this, right? It's a management program. I got into a major bank's management program because they came on campus and they pre-screened people, right? So there is no placement as such, but you have a lot of opportunities where companies will come and indicate that we are hiring for this data sciences, or we are hiring for management professionals or MBAs coming out of schools. I would also echo what Yudi said. The demand for data science, decision science people is quite high because the US economy is getting into more like, I would say, information-based business, whether it is DoorDash or whether it is in a Spotify, everyone looks at data, right? To kind of figure out how to provide better products for consumers. So I think analyzing that data and that skill set, how good you are, will figure out in your salary, in your compensation. So there is a lot of opportunities, all I can say.
All right. Rajika, though, I want you to touch upon one aspect of it, that in terms of scholarships, what are the prerequisites? So, could you touch upon that aspect, that if one has to qualify for a scholarship or, maybe then what is the requirement?
So that really varies depending on, who is the funder of the scholarship. So if the scholarship, and it very often will not be called a scholarship, is on campus and it flows through a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship at the graduate level. Now, that's a very common form, right, where we think of sort of a scholarship being given to an incoming international student. That flows through the department, and I think, as has been mentioned before, that's something that's secondary to first gaining admission, and then really, the department chair or the faculty members sort of deciding, if they have a limited pool of research or graduate assistantships, are they going to select you for that? So there's sort of the, and then all of your academic, what's part of your application packet will sort of feed into that, your essay, your scores, what you want to study, how driven you seem to be and committed to that, etc. For some of the larger scholarships that I mentioned, those are highly competitive. They all have websites. You can look at their requirements. Many of them will require you to have already secured an offer of admission. So they know that you're already headed to a particular institution, and then you can apply for it. In my case, I was actually a beneficiary of one of the ones that I mentioned, the American Association of University Women's International Fellowship. I found out about it after I'd arrived in the US. So no one was telling me these things, and I was really struggling financially, even though I had a teaching assistantship. So I sort of went online on my own and I began to search for these opportunities. And these are the ones that really fly under the radar, but they're so generous in terms of the amount. And I applied for that when I'd already started my doctoral work. So, there are different phases to this. So it really varies on sort of which opportunity it is that you're applying for. I did want to make a quick comment on the careers, if I may. Not to delve into data science. I am not an engineer or STEM person by any stretch of the imagination. But what I wanted to say was this. One of the big problems on American campuses is that there is a huge gap between the Office of International Student and Scholar Services, which will be the office that you will be going to most often and that handles everything for international students, and the Office of Career Services on campus, which are two totally different functions. And in my experience, and that of many, many students I've spoken with, there's a huge gap between the two. So you will have to almost act as the go-between between the two, because the International Student Office is going to know about all of the restrictions around your F1 student visa, what you can do, cannot do in terms of work and careers, etc. The career services will know what some things are that are going on campus around your career of choice, but the two don't speak to each other. So you are going to have to carry that burden of really continuing that conversation. And so that's something to be prepared for as well.
All right. No, very good point. Anand, this next one's for you. So experts, before we kind of move into further Q&A, I'm wondering, do we have time for just a couple of questions?
Yeah.
Rajika, Yudi?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, great. Okay. So Anand, this one's very quickly for you. And that is, how can I study business in the US after studying engineering in India?
I think you have to decide what it is. And I can give you my personal example is, I found that I had enough engineering background, but I wanted to diversify on the management side, right? So once you decide that and you go into a management field, you will have to do some prerequisites because you have not taken undergraduate business courses, right? So your econ 101, your management 101, you'll have to take a lot of those things. I convinced the school that I can take that, if while undergraduate classes are going on and I didn't want to pay for that, they allowed me to do that. But each one is own. So there will be certain prerequisites that you will have to take, and you have to plan for that. But you can do your graduate school, your MBA. Sometimes if you want to do it, you can take that in your home country so that you can, already qualify and you can check the box off saying that you have done this pre-qualification. So it's absolutely doable. You just need to understand the program requirements.
All right. Okay. All right, I'm just going through some of the questions that we have. Again, Anand, this is for you. This is from Saji George. Kindly provide us the details of the loan application process, ROI, repayment period, interest and EMI calculation, mortgage, without mortgage. So yeah, there's a lot of things that they'd like to know.
Yeah, I think when you go through an application process for loan, all of those will be detailed in the terms and conditions, right? What you want to make sure is you understand them and it's clear. And if you don't, you can call us and somebody will be able to explain to you. So the question, once you go through the process, it will tell you how much your monthly payments are going to be while you're in school, and then 6 months after, after you graduate. It will tell you what your rate is going to be, and hence what your monthly payments are going to be, what the fees are going to be. All of those will be spelled out. I cannot tell you what they're going to be because it depends upon your credit history, your application process, and where you are on the risk spectrum in terms of lending from an institution perspective. But those should be fairly clear to you while you're going through the application process.
Okay. All right. Any questions, experts, that you all can see that you'd like to respond to on the chat?
I think the
I
one
just
just
saw
come.
one. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just saw one again going back to scholarships, which I think both Anand and I missed mentioning, and someone specifically asked that question. MPower also has scholarships. They're offering wonderful scholarships. These are not comprehensive scholarships that will cover your entire education, but they are important, and they're offering an increasing number of scholarships, and for different groups of students. There's a very interesting opportunity for women who are studying STEM. There are scholarships for international students who are from refugee backgrounds, etc. So yes, MPower also has some
absolutely. I agree.
Anand, you want to delve slightly deeper into?
Yeah, I think, look, if you go onto the website, you will see a lot more information. Rajika is absolutely right. There's a whole bunch of scholarships that are available. They're not like, they don't cover your entire tuition, but they'll cover partially, right? And there are various ticket sizes, and we give them out fairly frequently. And we announce them publicly. So it's available on the website. You can go and take a look. There's a slew of them that you can qualify for. And if somebody is requested, you can request it online, and we can provide you the information.
All right. Yudi, this one's for you. How do you manage study and work, while you're studying?
Yeah. So the education system in United States, you're not gonna be like 9 to 5, like how we have typically in Indian universities, where you go in the morning and then you have classes, and then you have one hour break, and then you have again classes. It's almost like the way I like to refer it is like a thali system versus an a la carte, where you get to pick how many courses you want to do in each semester, and you ideally, as an F1 visa student, you have to have 8 credits or more, right? So to be a full-time student, so that typically means 3 subjects is what you need to take each semester. You can take more if you want to. So and then when you do that, it's not going to be every day. It's going to be only like Monday and Wednesday and Friday, 1 hour of the day. And then if you're taking 3 classes, then that's only 3 hours of your entire day. So now you have all of this open time available on Tuesday, Thursday. So that's when you can work on campus. And even when you're working on campus, like we said, you're going to be only allowed to do 20 hours on campus as an F1 visa, right? So when you're picking the shift, you're going to be given flexibility when you can do those hours. Can you do it like 2 hours on Monday, 5 hours on Tuesday, because you don't have, so you get to pick your shift and you can work around with your manager, all of that. So it's very flexible in terms of that. But I think the biggest thing is like you need to block out your calendars, and like that is just the pure time management technique which I use, is like putting those things which is there on your day to day, put it in your calendar so you really know how much time you have and where you want to spend your time.
So discipline is what you're talking of.
Yes.
Yes.
I think it also goes back to what Rajika was saying. You have to operate as very independently, which is not, people are not used to it, and you have to schedule your time very carefully and free up for getting these things done.
All right. What are the most common hurdles international students face after getting into a university? This is not specifically marked to anyone, but anyone can pick up this question. Anand, you have a go.
I can. I mean, from my perspective, I think it's adjusting to a new environment, right? Some of you might not have even seen snow, for example, and you're seeing for the first time. It's meeting a lot of different people and adjusting to the lifestyles and the timelines. A lot of things, what you got used to, 20, 25 years is going to be very different in a very different environment, right? Everything from food to finding your way around, commuting, you're on the wrong side of the street. So a lot of those things you have to adjust immediately and kind of figure out, are you going to get your driver's license? Are you going to drive? Things like that. Basic adjustment along with your curriculum and along with your education. You got to redo some of your basics. That would be my view.
Yudi.
Yeah, very similar. But I think the one thing is like so you will face loneliness, even though you will feel like you don't belong, even though there are people around you. So you want to get out of your comfort zone and like really try to make an effort to make friends and know people around you. Expect individualism. So people, for some reason, once they are here, everyone is thinking about their life. So like think the bhaichara we have in India, you will not have that same thing. I mean, again, like you will, I'm not trying to like do that. A roommate can make or break your relationships. I mean, make or break your master's experience. So you really want to choose your roommates wisely, because there's going to be like a whole big boss situation happening in your apartment. So someone took your bread, someone took your milk, and then they're fighting over those things. You didn't do dishes. So those are small things, but they impact you emotionally and mentally, and you have a lot to worry. Like Anand said, I mean, we have our parents, mom cook food for you and take care of your bills, but now you have to do all of this on your own. So getting that mindset prepared, which Rajika mentioned already, like prepared before coming, is going to be the huge one to be successful.
No, well said, Yudi. I think, important points to note that you will be lonely. It is possible you will feel alienated. It's going to be, different from what you're used to. So, just kind of managing expectations. I think all of that are important points. Any questions, Yudi, that you think, we need to quickly respond to? So this is now a last request to Rajika and Anand as well. And, I think we can take one or two questions and then we'll have to close. Sorry, we just don't have the time.
Can I? So Meloni, there's one question that came up in the chat that I thought was really interesting that I'd like to address. And I'm paraphrasing it, but someone said that with everything that's going on and a lot of geopolitical issues, etc., should we really still be thinking about the US? And aren't there other destinations to look at, the obvious, Anglophone ones like Australia, Canada, and others? So I do want to address that, because yes, this is true that today's students have choice. You have a lot of choice and you're all really well informed. There are lots of great countries to go to study. Countries are competing to attract students like you. So absolutely, there's choice. You could go to Europe and get an almost free education. But we are here to talk about the US. And what I will say is this. Just look at the numbers. And it's been very striking this year. And Miloni, you began with that, the US has seen such a resurgence of international students sort of flocking back to universities here. And that consistently we see that no matter what's happening, the US remains the number one choice of students, as is evident in the data. And the last thing I want to say to that is that yes, all of the other destinations are potentially attractive, but almost every country at some point or the other is going to deal with the same challenges around international students. So of course, we all know about the breakdown in relations between India and Canada that's affecting things. And just recently, in the past few days, things have been falling apart in the UK, where their post-graduation route for international students is now at risk. So all of this is to say that these things will play out in almost every country that's a major destination for international students. So weigh all of that sensibly, but keep in mind that if your dream is really to study in the US, then it still does remain the top destination.
All right. Yudi, any words that you have for everyone listening in, just to round up the entire conversation from your point, and perhaps anything that you feel we might have not addressed?
No, I think we've covered a lot of things. One advice, when every time people ask me like, hey, what's the one advice would you give to a student who's planning to come, is to expect the difficulty. It is not going to be easy. It's gonna be hard, right? So like, come with that expectation that life is not gonna be like, people say that, oh, you went to America, life to set hai. Like it's not like that. It's your life is just begin. It's a new chapter, and so expect the difficulty. So when you come with that expectation, when things don't go your way, you had already that expectation, so it doesn't come as a surprise and shock you. So yeah, that's the advice I would give.
That's one advice. All right, Anand, your turn now.
You're muted, Anand.
I was saying on the positive side, US provides one of the best educations in the world, right? Yeah, especially in the graduate arena, graduate school. It gives you a full 360-degree view. It enhances your personality and your ability to communicate your ideas. So I think, what Yudi and Rajika mentioned, all true, right? But still, there's a high degree of value to a US education, number one. And number two, what I would say is, you've got to be a little bit bold and confident in approaching this, regardless of what the environment. You can overcome all of that, but you need to have a certain degree of confidence in your pursuit if that's something that you want to achieve.
All right, Anand. Thanks very much. Rajika, the final word belongs to you.
Oh dear. No, I agree with everything that's been said, and just to echo what Anand said, that and I refer to it as a made in America degree that takes you very, very far. And I guess my closing word of advice, something which we've kind of not talked about, is that when you come to the US or wherever you may go to study, really know from the beginning that you are in many ways an unofficial ambassador for who you are, your country, and your culture. And you might not be thinking of this in the immediate term because you're so focused on where do I apply, where do I get admission, how am I going to cover my finances, and everything we've talked about here. But it's something that you will reflect back on later. So if you're aware of that, that's wonderful, because during your studies, you can then really be that advocate and really be that representative of who you are and where you're coming from. And, you see that today, like, look at Yudi. He's like an amazing unofficial ambassador for, Indian students doing what he's doing. And I'm sure he wasn't thinking of that in day one when he got to Chico. Not at all. But it's something we all reflect back on later on, because I'll just say that, higher education or an American college or university is really the best way to build bridges and really build that long-term understanding between cultures and countries. And, you look at whether it's our government leaders, you look at world leaders, you look at university presidents, look at the number of university presidents now in the US who are former international students from India. And that really shows you, you know, how important. Someone said, like, is this still important? Yes, it's important for all of these reasons. So hopefully, you know, those are things that you'll also be carrying with you.
All right. Rajika, I think that was the perfect end. You know, there are many, many questions that are still coming in. But to everyone, you know, in the audience, thank you very much. I mean, it was because of you that, you know, we had a richer conversation. We'll try and send these questions across to our experts, and we'll see what is the best way for us to address them. But Dr. Rajika Bhandari, Yudi J, and Anand Cavale, thank you so very much for your patience, for your time, and for the insights that you offered. I'm sure all of this, you know, will go a long way in helping a lot of these people who've joined us today. Thank you very much.
Thanks again. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thanks for.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.